when walking becomes anesthesia, the day the body asks for more than movement. There comes a silent moment in life when a person realizes they keep moving, but no longer feel whole in that movement. They walk every day, do what they were told to do, follow the guidance with almost religious discipline, and even so, something seems to be slipping away inside, as if strength was slowly draining, as if balance were more fragile, as if confidence had fallen a few steps behind. It is not laziness. It is not a lack of will. It is a different kind of tiredness, an emotional tiredness of someone who did everything right and still feels afraid of the future. Many older adults over the age of 75 live exactly this, a body that walks but no longer responds as it once did, legs that move but no longer support with the same sense of safety, a walk that calms the mind for a few minutes but does not prevent that deep feeling of weakening, and along with this, a silent anguish is born. Am I losing my autonomy even though I'm doing what they say is enough? This fear is rarely spoken out loud. It stays hidden, but it weighs. It weighs when getting up from a chair. It weighs when climbing a step. It weighs in the simple act of turning quickly inside the house. There is an invisible weariness in those who have spent a lifetime obeying recommendations, listening to doctors, following advice, trusting. A weariness of those who feel their body no longer responds as before, but do not know exactly why. And perhaps the hardest truth is this: walking by itself often becomes anesthesia. It calms, yes. It organizes thoughts, yes. But it does not awaken the deep body that sustains autonomy. Movement without stimulus does not create adaptation. The human body, even at 75, 80, or 90 years old, is still learning. But it only learns when it is challenged with intention, not merely repeated out of habit. The neuroscience of active aging shows us something powerful and at the same time forgotten. The aging brain is still plastic. It still creates connections. It still responds. But it needs clear signals. It needs gentle, conscious, respectful challenges. Walking every day repeats the same pattern. The brain calms down, goes on autopilot, rests. And that is not wrong. The problem is believing that this is enough to protect deep joints, postural muscles, balance, and functional strength. It is not. And saying this is not a criticism. It is an awakening. When the body begins to ask for more than steps, it is not failing, it is communicating, it is saying it needs presence, not just movement. It needs intention, not merely repetition. Walking is important, yes. But walking does not wake up forgotten muscles. It does not train the brain to react to a loss of balance. It does not teach the body to rise with dignity after sitting. Walking calms the nervous system, but it does not build bodily sovereignty. There is a simple metaphor that helps explain this. Walking is like praying in silence. It is a beautiful, constant gesture that brings peace. But strengthening the body is answering the prayer with conscious action. It is listening to the inner request for firmness, for safety, for autonomy, and saying, I am here, I take care of you. Aging does not mean accepting weakening as destiny. It means learning a new way to stimulate the body with respect, with calm, with intention. And that is exactly what begins now. Forgotten strength. The exercise that awakens muscles time tried to silence. There is a loss that almost no one notices when it begins. It does not warn with pain. It does not shout. It does not interrupt the day. It simply settles in silently, like a shadow growing at the end of the afternoon. It is the loss of functional strength. The kind of strength that does not appear in photos, that cannot be measured in the mirror, but that sustains the dignity of simple gestures. Getting up from a chair, planting the feet on the ground, feeling that the body obeys when the mind asks. For a long time, it is believed this happens simply because the years have passed. But time alone does not steel muscles. What silences them is the lack of the right stimulus. There is an old idea, repeated so often that it became truth for many. Muscle disappears because age arrived. But the body does not work that way. Muscle retreats when it is no longer invited to participate in daily life with intention. It does not vanish all at once. It withdraws. It becomes quiet. And that is what makes everything so dangerous, because when a person notices getting up from a chair is no longer automatic, it becomes an internal test, a moment when the mind thinks before the body. And thinking before standing up is when autonomy begins to be questioned. There is a rarely spoken name for this process, but it explains much of what happens after 75. It is the loss of strength that serves living, not showing off. Strength that sustains function. Strength that keeps the body reliable. When it diminishes, the body still walks, still moves, still appears active. But inside, something has changed. The brain begins to economize movement. Posture adapts. Steps become shorter, not by conscious choice, but for protection. The body tries to avoid the embarrassment of failing. And it is curious to notice how a simple, almost forgotten gesture carries enormous power when done with presence. Sitting and standing is not just a mechanical movement. It is a deep conversation between brain and muscles. When this gesture happens consciously, slowly, respectfully, something reorganizes inside. Large muscles that were dormant receive an invitation again. Glutes, hips, thighs. They do not return in a hurry. They respond when they feel safe. And the brain, perceiving this response, begins to trust again. This reconnection is not only physical, it is neurological. The brain needs to relearn that it can rely on the body. Each time the body responds, even with effort, a silent message is sent. There is still strength here. There is still capacity. There is still response. And this changes everything, because fear begins to diminish even before strength increases. The mind calms when it realizes it is not alone, that the body still participates. There is something deeply symbolic in this. Muscles are like old letters kept in a drawer. Over time, they seem worthless, forgotten. But when opened again, they reveal stories, memories, power. The body, even aged, keeps important letters. It does not ask for youth, it asks for invitation. And when that invitation is made with respect, the body responds not with haste, but with truth. Balance is not luck. It is trainable neurological memory. There is a fear that does not appear on exams. It does not arise in consultations, is rarely named, but governs many movements after 75. It is the fear of falling. Not only the physical fall, but the symbolic fall. The idea of losing control of one's own body, of depending on someone else to get up, of no longer trusting one's own steps. This fear settles in slowly. First, the person avoids a movement, then avoids a situation. And when they realize it, the world has become smaller, not because of real weakness, but because of accumulated insecurity. For a long time, it was believed that balance is lost because age advances, as if it were a thread that breaks with no possibility of repair. But balance is not a fixed gift. It is a living memory, a constant conversation between eyes, feet, joints, and brain. When this conversation stops happening with attention, the body begins to doubt itself. And when the body doubts, it stiffens. And when it stiffens, risk increases. It is not time that takes balance away. It is the silence between these parts that once communicated better. Inside the brain, there is a region that works tirelessly to keep the body upright, even when the person does not notice. It organizes fine adjustments, almost invisible corrections, small responses that prevent a fall before it even happens. Over the years, this region does not disappear. It simply receives fewer clear stimuli. And when it is not called to participate, it becomes less confident. The body then begins to move with excessive caution. Steps shorten. The eyes search for support. The mind anticipates the worst. When balance is addressed consciously, something curious happens. Even before the body becomes firmer, fear begins to diminish, because the brain understands it is being heard again, that it no longer needs to work alone, that it can test, adjust, learn. The simple act of supporting one's own weight, even for a few seconds, creates a deep response. It is not an aggressive challenge. It is dialogue, and dialogue restores confidence. There is an emotional dimension to this that is often ignored. Balance does not sustain only the body. It sustains identity. A person who trusts their own feet feels more present in the world, less withdrawn, less vigilant. The body relaxes when it realizes it does not need to defend itself all the time. And this relaxation, paradoxically, makes movement safer. Balance is like faith. It is not born ready. It does not sustain itself alone. It is built in instability, in small adjustments, in renewed trust with each silent attempt. It is not luck. It is not privilege. It is memory that can be reactivated. And when that happens, the body ceases to be a place of fear and becomes a place that can be inhabited again. Joints that sleep. The slow movement that restores dignity to knees and ankles. There is a type of stiffness that goes beyond the body. It begins in the joints, but gradually reaches mood, patience, the way a person relates to their own day. Knees that feel stuck. Ankles that wake up stiff as if they had spent the night in deep silence. And along with this sensation, constant caution is born. The body begins to avoid bending, avoid turning, avoid trusting, not because it cannot, but because it has learned to fear pain. Over time, a silent agreement is created. Move less to hurt less. This agreement seems logical, but it exacts a high price. Joints were made to move. They do not live only on rest. They live on nourishment that comes from movement. When this movement disappears, the joint does not rest. It falls asleep, and a sleeping joint loses the ability to protect itself. Pain then does not diminish. It changes place. It becomes deeper, more constant, more limiting. There is something often forgotten when speaking about aging. Joints are not dry pieces. They are living structures. They feed on movement itself, like a sponge that needs to be pressed and released to receive water. When movement is too fast, the body defends itself. When it is avoided, the body closes. But when it happens slowly, consciously, respectfully, something reorganizes inside. The brain understands there is no threat. The joint understands it can participate again. Slowness, in this context, is not weakness. It is bodily intelligence. Slow movements give the brain time to perceive, adjust, correct. They awaken deep sensors that were forgotten, sensors that inform position, angle, pressure. When these signals begin to circulate again, the body feels safer. And when the body feels safe, it allows more movement. It is a silent cycle of recovering trust. There is also a dignity that returns when joints move with less resistance. The person stops feeling trapped inside their own body. The simple act of rotating an ankle or bending a knee stops being a risk and becomes a dialogue in which the body says, I am still here. I can still respond. I can still participate in your daily life. Joints are like the hinges of the soul. They allow passage. They allow transition. They allow coming and going. When they are not used, they rust, not out of malice of time, but from involuntary abandonment. And when they are touched with care, with presence, with respect for internal rhythm, they return to fulfilling their silent role, sustaining movement without stealing freedom. The forgotten trunk, the center that sustains the body and identity. There is an almost imperceptible change that happens over the years. It does not begin with pain, it begins with posture. The body, little by little, starts to lean forward. The shoulders close, the chest withdraws, and along with this silent gesture, something deeper happens. The person does not only bend physically, they begin to feel smaller inside their own body, as if they were shrinking in the world, as if they occupied less space, asked less passage, breathed more cautiously. The trunk is more than a body part. It is the axis. It is where everything connects. Legs, arms, breathing, balance, gaze. When this center loses participation, the body tries to compensate. Arms work more. Legs strain beyond what is necessary. The lower back complains, and walking, even when daily, begins to be supported by structures that were not made to carry everything alone. The result is not only pain, it is insecurity. There is a deep relationship between posture and emotion. The brain interprets trunk position as a constant signal of internal state. An upright body sends messages of presence, readiness, safety. A withdrawn body sends messages of defense, caution, retreat. Over time, these messages shape mood, disposition, and even how the person perceives themselves. It is not only the body that bends. Identity adapts to this curve. When the center of the body is perceived again, something reorganizes from the inside out. It is not brute strength, it is silent support. An activation that does not draw attention, but changes everything. The spine feels more supported. Movements become more coordinated. Walking gains more security without extra effort. And most importantly, the person feels whole again inside their own body. This change does not happen explosively. It happens like a fine adjustment, almost intimate. The trunk, when recognized again, restores an old and precious sensation, being present. Present in one's own body, present in space, present in one's own story. Lower back pain often is not only physical, it is the signal of a center that has been forgotten for too long. The trunk is the altar of the body. It is around it that everything organizes itself. When this center is respected again, the body finds order. And when the body finds order, the mind rests. Not because problems have disappeared, but because there is a firm base supporting every movement. And a firm base restores something many believe they have lost with age, the sense of dignity in simply existing upright, seated, present, breathing to support the body. When breath becomes strength. There is a kind of fatigue that does not begin in the legs or the back. It begins in the chest, a feeling of short breath, of shallow breathing, of breath that seems not to keep up with the rhythm of life. Over time, this sensation shapes behavior. The person avoids moving too much, avoids climbing a bit faster, avoids situations that demand bodily presence, not because they do not want to, but because the body has learned to protect itself from the sensation of lack. And this protection gradually becomes limitation. For many years, it was taught that breathing serves only to bring oxygen to the body. But breathing is much more than that. It is an internal structure of support. The way air enters and leaves directly influences trunk stability, balance, and even how the brain interprets safety. When breathing becomes short and high, the body enters a state of alert, muscles tense, balance becomes more fragile. The mind anticipates risk. At the center of this process, there is a deep, silent muscle that works all the time without asking for recognition. It separates the chest from the abdomen and acts as an internal base. When this muscle loses participation, the entire body reorganizes less efficiently. Posture changes. The lower back overloads. Balance becomes more dependent on compensations. It is not just lack of air, it is lack of internal support. When breathing returns to its natural place, something curious happens. The body feels held from within. Tension decreases. Movements become more confident. The brain receives a clear message that there is no immediate danger. And this message changes everything. Anxiety diminishes. Fear of falling softens. The body begins to respond more calmly, even in challenging situations. There is a deep connection between breathing and staying upright, not only physically, but symbolically. Those who breathe better feel more present, more anchored, more capable of sustaining their own body in space. Balance improves not only because muscles work better, but because the nervous system leaves constant defense mode. And a body that is not defending itself all the time moves with more freedom. Breathing well is holding the body from within. It is creating an invisible base that supports every gesture, every step, every change of position. It is not about filling the lungs. It is about restoring to the body the feeling that it is supported. And when this internal support exists, aging stops being a continuous loss and becomes an adjustment. An adjustment that preserves what is essential, the ability to be present, firm, and confident within one's own body. The body does not ask for more steps. It asks for presence, intention, and the right stimulus. There is a deep fear that is almost never spoken out loud. It is not exactly the fear of aging, because everyone ages. The true fear is disappearing little by little while still alive. It is feeling that the body is still here but no longer responds. That days pass, but presence diminishes. That autonomy dissolves into small daily concessions, almost imperceptible, until the moment the person looks at themselves and no longer recognizes their own capacity to act. Many believe that after a certain age, less is enough. Less movement, less challenge, less expectation. This idea seems gentle, but it hides a dangerous emotional trap. The body interprets less as abandonment, not as care. And silent abandonment generates withdrawal. It generates energy conservation. It generates an aging that does not come only with wrinkles, but with internal shrinking. It is not the passing of years that limits. It is the absence of meaningful stimulus. There is enormous potential that still exists after 75, even when no one else seems to see it. A potential for adaptation, for reorganization, for response. The body does not ask for youth back. It asks for respect for its intelligence. It asks for stimuli that speak to the brain, that awaken forgotten muscles, that restore confidence to joints, that sustain balance and posture. This potential does not shout. It waits, and it is often mistaken for fragility. It is important to understand a simple model that completely changes how we look at aging. Walking calms, and that is valuable. It calms the mind, organizes thoughts, brings rhythm, but strengthening restores sovereignty. It restores the feeling that the body still responds when called, that there is still command, still dialogue, still presence. One does not replace the other. They complement each other. When one only walks, the body rests. When one also strengthens, the body participates. Few stimuli, when done with awareness, have the power to transform functional future. It is not about quantity, it is about intention. The aging body responds better to clarity than to intensity. It does not need to be pressured, it needs to be invited. And when this invitation is made with respect, something lights up inside. Confidence returns in small signs. Fear diminishes. Posture adjusts. Daily life becomes more inhabitable. Aging is not extinguishing the flame. It is learning to feed it differently, with less haste, with more presence, with stimuli that honor the body's history instead of fighting against it. When this change happens, aging ceases to be only a sum of losses and becomes a process of conscious care. A care that does not promise miracles, but restores something essential: the feeling of being whole inside one's own body. God bless you, and until the next